Hello everyone, and welcome. This is a long-form video featuring a mix of true scary stories designed specifically for relaxation and sleep. What makes this different is the soundscape, a custom-mixed, high-definition range you will only hear on this channel. If you struggle with anxiety or stress, this combination of storytelling and unique audio could be exactly what you've been looking for. If you enjoy the experience, the 3 best ways to support this channel are to hit the like button, subscribe for more, and drop a comment to let me know you are here. It all helps immensely. I truly hope this helps you. Thank you for your support, and let's begin. Every kid has that one spot in their hometown, the abandoned place you're dared to enter. For us, it was the old Blackwood orchard. The dare was easy. Sneak in, steal an apple, and get out. We should have known that in a place like that, nothing is free. You always end up paying for what you take. It was one of those painfully boring summer nights in our small, sleepy town. The kind of night where bad ideas seem like brilliant adventures. There were 4 of us, me, my girlfriend Sarah, our perpetually bored friend Dana, and Liam, who was always the one pushing for a little chaos. It was Liam's idea, of course. Let's do the Blackwood Orchard. The Blackwood Orchard was local legend. A massive
This is messed up, Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. I want to leave. We're almost there, Liam insisted, his bravado clearly fading. We just grab an apple and go. It's the dare. He was trying to convince himself more than us. We finally broke through a thick row of trees and found it, the center of the orchard. A massive, ancient apple tree stood alone in a small clearing, its branches heavy with dark red fruit. Liam, determined to finish what he started, strode forward and plucked an apple from a low-hanging branch. The moment his fingers closed around the fruit, a sound echoed from the edge of the orchard, sharp and violent in the crushing silence. A loud, metallic snap. It was the sound of a large bear trap closing. We froze. Every drop of blood in my body turned to ice. That wasn't an old trap accidentally springing. It was a signal, a welcome bell, and it meant we weren't alone. Go! Go now, I yelled, and we bolted, crashing blindly through the rows of trees, trying to find our way back to the fence. But in the dark, every row looked the same. The orchard, which had seemed so straightforward on the way in, now felt like an impossible maze designed to keep us there. We could hear him before we saw him, a faint, tuneless whistling weaving through the trees. It would grow louder, as if he were right behind us, then fade, as if he were toying with us. Panic took over. We were just running with no sense of direction. We stumbled into another small clearing and saw a dilapidated wooden shack. Without a second thought, we piled inside, closing the rotting door behind us and plunging ourselves into musty darkness. The shack was a workshop of horrors. Piles of old, donated-looking clothes were heaped in the corners. Boxes were filled with personal effects, wallets, single shoes, cheap jewelry, faded photographs of smiling families. On a workbench lay a half-finished effigy, its burlap sack head waiting to be filled. This was where he made them. This was his studio. Huddled together, smelling of dust and decay, we peeked through a grime-covered window pane. And we saw him. A tall, gaunt man, moving slowly between the trees in the moonlight. He wasn't running or searching. He was just working. He carried a large burlap sack and what looked like a long-handled cutting tool. He stopped at one of the effigies we had passed earlier, calmly cut the twine holding it to the tree, stuffed the whole thing into his sack, and continued his slow, methodical patrol. He was cleaning up. He was the groundskeeper, and he knew we were here.
We watched in silent terror as the orchard man continued his rounds. He wasn't searching for us. It was worse. He was moving in a slow, deliberate spiral, and our little shack was at the center of it. He wasn't hunting. He was herding. Sooner or later, his path would lead him right to our door. "We have to run," Liam whispered, his voice cracking. "Now, while he's on the other side of the clearing." "He'll hear us," Sarah hissed. "He already knows we're here," Liam shot back. Before I could argue, he threw the door open and sprinted out into the night. We had no choice but to follow, our feet pounding on the soft earth. We ran in the opposite direction, the sound of the man's whistling seeming to come from everywhere at once. In the chaos, we got separated. I kept a tight grip on Sarah's hand, but we lost sight of Liam and Dana in the maze of gnarled trees. We could hear them crashing through the undergrowth somewhere to our left, and we could hear the whistling seem to follow them. It felt like the man was choosing his prey. My lungs burned, my legs ached. We finally stopped, gasping for air, and realized we had run in a circle. We were back at the center of the orchard, standing before the ancient apple tree. Liam's apple, the one he had picked, lay on the ground, a single bite taken out of it. Lying next to it was Dana's silk scarf. And then we saw the new addition. A new effigy, one that hadn't been there before, was now propped against the trunk of the massive tree. It was made from a fresh set of clothes, a generic hoodie and jeans, but perched on its lumpy head was a blue baseball cap. Liam's baseball cap. It must have fallen off when he ran. A sickening realization washed over me. The man was using our things. He was creating effigies of us. He was marking us. Just then, a scream tore through the night. It was Dana, a sharp, piercing cry of absolute terror that was cut off with a sickening, abrupt silence. We stood frozen, paralyzed by the sound. The orchard was deadly quiet again. A few minutes later, the whistling started again. It was closer this time, much closer. We knew Liam and Dana were gone. We didn't know if they were dead or alive, but they had been taken, and we were next. Survival instinct, pure and animalistic, took over. We saw the orchard man's shadowy form disappear down a row of trees, giving us a small window of opportunity. "Run," I said to Sarah, my voice hoarse, and we ran. We didn't care about being quiet anymore. We crashed through low-hanging branches, our only goal the memory of the fence. We could hear the man behind us now. The whistling was gone, replaced by angry, guttural shouts. The hunt was no longer a game. We finally saw it, the glint of moonlight on the chain-link fence. We ran with the last of our strength, our lungs on fire. We found the opening we'd crawled through and scrambled under, cutting our arms and backs on the sharp wire. We didn't stop. We sprinted across the open field, not daring to look back, expecting a hand to grab our shoulder at any second. We hit the asphalt of the main road and just kept running. A pair of headlights washed over us. A semi-truck slowed to a stop, its air brakes hissing. The driver, a large man with a kind face, took one look at our terrified, bleeding state and immediately called 911. The police came. We told them everything. The effigies, the shack, the orchard man, our missing friends. They searched the orchard all night and the next day. They found nothing. The shack was empty. There were no effigies, no personal items, no bear traps, and no sign of Liam or Dana. They found our tracks leading in, and just our tracks leading out. The official investigation concluded that our friends had likely run away, and we had invented the story out of panic and guilt. They were never seen again. I tried to move on, but the orchard had taken a piece of me. A year later, I drove the 2 hours back to that town. I couldn't help it. I parked my car on the road overlooking the Blackwood orchard and looked through a pair of powerful binoculars. In the bright afternoon sun, it just looked like an old, overgrown apple farm. Quiet, still. Then I focused on the ancient tree at the very center, and I saw it. Tied to a low-hanging branch, fluttering gently in the breeze, was a small, tattered strip of silver fabric, Dana's scarf. And tied just above it, a tiny, faded piece of blue and white checkered cloth, a scrap from the shirt Liam had been wearing that night. They hadn't run away. They had become part of the orchard's collection. There are places in this world that operate on their own dark rules. They're not abandoned, they're just waiting. We thought we were just kids stealing an apple, but to that place we were trespassers in a holy site. And we learned the hard way that when you trespass, you leave a part of yourself behind. Sometimes it's just a piece of clothing, and sometimes it's the friends you came with. So the next time you think about crossing a fence for a cheap thrill, ask yourself what you're truly willing to leave behind. Because some places always, always collect their toll. As an urban explorer, you learn that every abandoned place has a story. Most are just stories of decay and forgotten memories, but some places, they're not dead, they're just sleeping. Our mistake was flipping the wrong switch and waking it up. My friend Ben and I were urban explorers. We didn't break things or steal souvenirs. We were historians of decay, armed with cameras, documenting the beautiful, sad places the world had left behind. Our holy grail, the one place we'd been planning to explore for months, was the old KDK broadcast station. It sat on a lonely hill overlooking the city, a concrete, windowless bunker, topped by a massive skeletal radio tower that looked like a needle stitching the sky. The station had gone off the air abruptly in the early 80s. The official story was bankruptcy, but the rumors were much darker. Stories of the station's eccentric owner having a complete mental breakdown, claiming the signals were speaking back to him right before he vanished without a trace. For us, it was irresistible. Getting in was surprisingly easy. A rusted-out service door had been forced open years ago. The moment we stepped inside, it was like stepping into a time capsule. The air was thick with the smell of dust, ozone, and decaying paper. We walked through hallways lined with old promotional posters, past soundproofed studios with vinyl records still scattered on the floor. Our footsteps echoed in the profound, heavy silence. The heart of the station was the main broadcast control room. It was a beautiful sight. A massive console with hundreds of knobs and switches faced a huge glass window looking into the main studio. Reels of magnetic tape sat on racks, untouched for 40 years. It was a tomb dedicated to sound. Man, can you imagine this place all lit up? Ben said, his voice full of awe. His eyes were fixed on a large red-handled breaker switch on the main power panel. It was labeled Main Broadcast Power. Don't even think about it, I said. We don't know what the wiring is like. We could start a fire or electrocute ourselves. We'll just flip it on for a second, he pleaded, his hand already on the handle. Just to see the lights. It'll be the ultimate photo. Against every rational instinct in my body, I gave in. Fine, 5 seconds, then we kill it. Ben grinned.
We stood frozen, our blood turning to ice. That wasn't a recording. It sounded live. The tone, the cadence, the slight pause, it felt like someone was on the other side of a microphone right now. The station has been silent for a long time, the voice continued, its tone warm and friendly. It's wonderful to have a live studio audience once again. We have a very special broadcast for our 2 new guests tonight. We certainly hope you enjoy the show. Shut it off! I screamed. Ben lunged for the main breaker, but it wouldn't budge. He threw his whole body against it, but the handle was stuck solid, as if it had been welded into place. The low hum of the equipment around us grew louder, more intense. Our guest in the red jacket seems to be having some trouble with the power. A shame. Ben was wearing a bright red jacket. My heart hammered against my ribs. It wasn't a recording. It wasn't a prank. It was intelligent, and it could see us. We have to get out of here, I yelled, pulling Ben away from the panel. We sprinted out of the control room and back into the dark main hallway. As we ran, the station's PA system, the speakers in the ceiling, crackled to life. The same calm, confident announcer's voice echoed through the entire building, surrounding us. Leaving so soon, gentlemen? But the show has just begun. We were now being hunted by a disembodied voice in a concrete labyrinth. It began to play with us. We'd hear the sound of heavy footsteps running up behind us, but when we'd spin around with our flashlights, the hallway would be empty. We'd hear a door slam shut in a room just ahead of us, only to find the door rusted open, untouched for decades. The station was its playground, and sound was its weapon. We finally made it back to the main entrance, the heavy steel door we had come through. I pushed on the handle. It didn't move. I looked up. A heavy industrial magnetic lock above the door, which had been dormant and dark before, was now glowing with a single bright red light. It was sealed. I'm afraid I can't let you leave just yet, the announcer's voice echoed calmly from the ceiling. We have a request. We were trapped. Every exit was sealed. The voice was our constant companion, a sadistic narrator to our panic. Our guests appear to be looking for the fire exit. A good choice, but I'm afraid that door was sealed in 78. It knew the building's layout. It knew our every move. The entity's games grew more sophisticated, more personal. It started using mimicry. Mark, in here, I found a window.
I heard Ben's voice yell from a dark office to our left. I started to run towards it, but the real Ben, who was right behind me, grabbed my shoulder. "That wasn't me," he whispered, his face pale with terror. The voice in the office chuckled, the sound morphing back into the smooth announcer. "Looks like we have some smart listeners tonight." It started using our own voices against us, playing back snippets of our conversations from earlier, twisting our words. My confident, "Fine, 5 seconds," now sounded like a fool's final words. Ben's excited, "It'll be the ultimate photo," was now a bitter, ironic taunt. It had been recording us since the moment we stepped inside. In the disorienting chaos of echoing sounds and our own panicked shouting, we got separated. I rounded a corner and Ben was just gone. "Ben!" I yelled. The only answer was the announcer's voice. "It seems we've lost one of our contestants. Let's see how the other one does on his own." I ducked into a small, heavily padded recording booth, slamming the thick, soundproof door shut. My own ragged breathing was the only sound. The silence was a relief, but the isolation was terrifying. Through the small, double-paned glass window, I could see the empty hallway. In the booth with me was a single, vintage microphone on a stand. As I watched in horror, the little on-air light above the microphone flickered and glowed a steady, hellish red. The announcer's voice spoke again, but this time it wasn't from the hallway speakers. It was intimate, right beside my ear, as if it were coming from inside my own head. And now, the voice whispered, a word from our guest in the booth. Just then, a scream erupted over the station's PA system. It was Ben, a raw, piercing scream of pure agony, followed by a sickening series of wet, snapping and crunching sounds. The scream was cut off abruptly, and then silence. A silence more profound. I stayed in that pitch-black, silent recording booth for what felt like a lifetime. I was paralyzed, convinced that the moment I opened a door, it would be waiting for me. But nothing happened. The silence remained unbroken. Ben was dead. I had heard it, and I was next. But the attack never came. Eventually, the instinct to survive overrode the fear. I pushed open the heavy door. The station was dead. The power I couldn't turn off was now completely gone. Using the weak flashlight from my phone, I navigated the now silent hallways, my every step echoing like a gunshot. I made my way back to the main entrance. The red light on the magnetic lock was dark. I pushed the handle. The door swung open with a groan. I was free. I stumbled out into the pre-dawn light and ran. I didn't look back at the dark, silent building or its skeletal tower. I ran until I hit the main road. I ran until I saw the lights of the city. I never saw Ben again. I told the police that we had gotten separated while exploring, that he must have fallen or gotten lost. They searched the station for days. They found his camera. They found his backpack. They never found Ben. He became just another one of the station's ghost stories. Years passed. I tried to build a new life, but the echo of that night never left me. I can't listen to the radio. The sound of static makes my skin crawl. One night, I was up late, falling down an internet rabbit hole. On a whim, I typed KDK radio into a search engine. I found a forum for shortwave radio enthusiasts and conspiracy theorists. One of the top posts was titled, new strange signal from old KDK frequency. My heart stopped. The post was from a guy who said he'd been picking up a bizarre repeating broadcast for the last week coming from the direction of the old station. He had uploaded a recording. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely click the link. The audio file played. It was mostly static, a low, familiar hiss, but underneath the static I could hear something, a faint, tinny music box tune. And then a voice cut through the hiss, a voice I knew from my nightmares, the calm, smooth announcer. And now, the voice said, the sound clear despite the static, a special dedication for our dear friend Mark, who couldn't stay for the end of the show. We have a new guest in the studio tonight. He'd like to say hello. Then a new voice spoke. It was muffled, filled with static and terror, distorted by fear and something else, something electronic. But I recognized it instantly. It was Ben's voice, and it was just screaming, on and on and on. I'd broken into a dozen houses before. You learn the tells, a full mailbox, overgrown lawn, no lights at night. The glass house on the hill was perfect. It was dark for weeks. I thought it was empty. Turns out, the owner was just waiting for a guest to complete his collection. Let me be clear, I'm not a bad guy. Not really. But my mom's medical bills were piling up, and the desperation was like a physical weight on my chest. I started doing small-time burglaries, empty houses, quick smash and grabs. I was good at it. I had rules. Never hit a house with a car in the driveway. Never take anything that feels personal. Just cash, jewelry, things that could be replaced, and never, ever get greedy. The house that broke all my rules was the place locals called the Glass House. It was a massive, ultra-modern mansion perched on a hill overlooking our town, all sharp angles and giant glass walls. It belonged to some eccentric tech billionaire who was never there. For a month, I watched it. No lights, no cars, no activity. It was the perfect score, the one big job that could solve all my problems. One moonless night, I made my move. I cut through the woods, scaled a low wall, and found myself on the immaculate property. There were no cameras, no dogs. The security was arrogant, almost non-existent. I found a small bathroom window I could jimmy open and slipped inside. I searched the master bedroom, the home office, the walk-in closets. There was no safe, no jewelry box, nothing of obvious value. The place was a fortress of minimalist emptiness. All I found was a wallet on a nightstand with a few $100s in it. It felt like a joke. Defeated, I decided to cut my losses and get out. I went back to the bathroom window I'd entered through. I slid the latch and pushed. It didn't budge. I pushed harder. Nothing. A cold knot of dread tightened in my stomach. It felt like it had been locked somehow, from the outside. I hurried to the back door, my heart starting to pound. I turned the deadbolt. It was already unlocked, but when I tried the handle, it wouldn't turn. I ran to the front door, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Locked. Every window I checked was now sealed tight. I was trapped. As I stood in the massive living room, panting, trying to figure out what to do, a soft click echoed through the house, and then every light in the mansion flickered on at once, bathing the sterile white rooms in a brilliant, clinical, shadowless light. I was completely exposed. A voice, smooth and cultured, echoed from hidden speakers in the ceiling. It was calm, polite, and filled with a terrifying amusement. "Welcome," the voice said. "I do apologize for the security measures. I simply couldn't have you leaving so soon. The display is not yet complete." I froze, every muscle in my body screaming. The owner was home. He had been here the whole time, watching me, letting me wander through his house like a rat in a maze. I spun around, looking for where the voice was coming from, for a place to hide. But there was nowhere to hide in that house of glass and white walls. "Please, don't be alarmed," the voice continued, a hint of laughter in it. "You have been so enjoyable to watch, so much life, so much desperation in your movements. You are exactly what I've been looking for." A section of a white wall near the staircase slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a hidden doorway. A man stepped out. He was older, maybe in his 60s, with perfectly styled silk. My mind was a screaming vortex of panic, but on the outside, I was frozen. The man, who introduced himself only as the curator, was the picture of calm hospitality. He wasn't holding a weapon. He wasn't shouting. He was acting like I was an expected guest who had just arrived for a dinner party. "A drink, perhaps?" he asked, walking over to a hidden bar that emerged from a wall. I just shook my head, unable to speak. My eyes darted around, looking for an escape, a weapon, anything. He noticed. "Oh, don't worry about all that," he said, with a dismissive wave of his hand. "There is no way out, not until the exhibit is complete. Allow me to give you the tour." He walked me over to the mannequin family on the couch. "The Peterson family," he said, his voice full of pride. "They were real estate developers who tried to cheat me. A permanent installation created in 2019. I captured them mid-argument. I think the tension is quite palpable, don't you?" The horrifying, unspeakable truth slammed into me. They weren't mannequins. They were people. He led me through the house, explaining each display. The dining couple were business rivals. A man posed looking out a window was a journalist who had written a negative article about him. Each one was a perfectly preserved human body, their skin having a waxy, translucent quality, their eyes a glassy, lifeless sheen. It was some kind of horrifying advanced taxidermy. He had turned them into his personal art collection. Some of them, like the Petersons, were adversaries, but others were simply opportunities, trespassers, like yourself. He smiled at me. People who chose to enter my world uninvited. I find they have the most authentic expressions. He led me down a hidden staircase into a basement, that was a cross between a pristine laboratory and an artist's studio. Medical equipment gleamed under bright fluorescent lights. Vats of chemicals lined one wall. He explained the process, a plastination technique he had perfected himself, which replaced every cell in the body with a polymer, freezing it forever in a single chosen moment. He spoke of it with the passion of a master sculptor discussing his clay. Then he led me back upstairs to the master bedroom, and we stood before the empty, spotlit platform. "I've been working on a new exhibit for this room," he said, his eyes gleaming with a terrifying creative fervor. "I'm calling it Desperation. I needed a centerpiece, a figure that could truly capture that raw, primal emotion. And then, my dear Alexander, you arrived, a young man, risking everything, not out of greed, but out of a desperate need." He never laid a hand on me. He didn't have to. He pressed a small button on a remote he was holding. A soft, hissing sound came from hidden vents in the ceiling. A sweet, cloying, almond-scented gas began to fill the room. "Don't fight it," the curator said softly, his voice full of artistic encouragement. "It will only spoil the authenticity of the final expression. Show me your fear. Show me your despair." My legs grew heavy. My vision started to swim. The last thing I saw was the curator's smiling, appreciative face as I collapsed onto the floor. I awoke to a strange kind of consciousness. I was aware. I could see. I could hear. I could feel the cool air on my skin, but I couldn't move a single muscle. My body was a statue, a prison for my screaming mind. I was standing on the platform in the bedroom. My body had been posed. My arms were outstretched, my fingers grasping for something that wasn't there. My head was turned. My mouth was open in a silent scream. My eyes wide with a terror that was all too real because it was the last emotion I had ever felt. I could see my reflection in a large mirror on the opposite wall. My skin was pale and waxy. My eyes, which I could not blink, were glassy, but still held the spark of my trapped consciousness. I was the newest mannequin. I was the centerpiece. My existence became an eternal waking nightmare. During the long, silent days, I was left alone in that sterile house, a silent observer in a room full of the dead, with nothing but my own frantic, looping thoughts for company. I screamed and screamed and screamed in my own mind, but my body remained perfectly, artistically still. But the true horror came at night. On some nights the curator would have guests. Other wealthy, silent, smiling people would arrive for private viewings of his collection. They would walk slowly through the house, admiring his work, their quiet voices discussing the pieces in hushed, appreciative tones. They would always end the tour in the master bedroom, standing before me. "This is his newest piece, The Trespasser." His guests would circle my platform, their dead eyes studying me. "Magnificent," one of them whispered just last night. "Look at the terror in his eyes, the pleading in his posture. It's so lifelike. He truly captures the very essence of desperation." And I was forced to stand there, screaming on the inside as they applauded the monster who had turned my final, terrified moments into a work of art. They tell you that when you break into a house, you should be afraid of what the owner might do to you, a gun, the police. But you never consider the worst possibility. You never consider that the owner might not want you to leave at all. Be careful which doors you open, because some houses aren't homes. They're private galleries, and the curator might just have an empty pedestal with your name on it.